I thought you were going to give away the whole thing in one sentence. Well, I hope this doesn't come off as heretical based on what you've just seen in that documentary, which was outstanding. But I loved at the end, she mentioned that there's room for both the traditional and the high tech. And my idea is definitely the latter, because I have a fair amount of experience with both interferometry and CNC machine tools. And if you know what either one or both of those things are, then you probably know that it would be really an interesting way to manufacture a mirror with a kind of a closed loop testing and computer controlled manufacturing. And trust me, there's a lot of creativity involved in designing special machine tools to do this. So I think of it as kind of raising the creativity from the level that it's at with pushing glass, which I've done lots of glass pushing, raising it up to the next level, or maybe a few levels. So if you're a person who's interested in any of this stuff, if you've done any of this, or if you've ever thought about doing it, I'd love to spend a few minutes talking to you about it. That QR code will send me a text. I'm not sure if that's going to work for everyone here, but I'm going to hang around here. Maybe after this is over, we could talk. Or I was thinking, tomorrow, say at noon in the food tent. I'll make sure I'm there for lunch. So swing on by and have a little chat. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Eli Goldfein, as Bruce mentioned, and I don't know if many of you know about adaptive optics, but it's one of the technologies that has most affected our understanding of the universe, and it is implemented in all of the largest and most powerful research telescopes. So I just want to give you a bit of an introduction into how this technology works. All right, so this technology was first conceived of in the 1950s, and its original purpose was to negate the effects of atmospheric distortion on military images of spy satellites from Russia. And so it was developed beginning in the 1970s, and it was commonly used and put into production since the 1990s. But what problem are we trying to solve with this technology? It's atmospheric distortion. So atmospheric distortion is blurriness in images that is caused by our atmosphere. So air in our atmosphere is a fluid like water, and it is turbulent. And these turbulent motions distort light that is coming into the telescope, which is why stars twinkle. This is where adaptive optics comes in. Adaptive optics uses sophisticated wavefront sensors to correct, next slide, oh, you're on it, oh, go back, the distorted image in real time by actually shifting specific points on the mirror. This is an amazing technology that has been revolutionary not only in astronomy, but in ophthalmology as well, actually. So, the intricacies of adaptive optics functionality and mechanism are necessary to review so you can just get a complete understanding of how this technology functions. So now I'm just going to explain how the general system works, and then I just want to tell you about how it's been applied in ophthalmology as well. So the way that adaptive optics solves atmospheric distortion is through a technique called mirror deformation. So you can go to the next slide there. So that means you're adjusting tiny points under usually the secondary mirror. And these points are raised or lowered, typically only a couple of nanometers, and that's enough to correct the distortion. So these points adjust themselves via many actuators, next slide, under the adaptive mirror that can move up and down as needed. An actuator is a small mechanism that uses a motor to move a metal rod up and down. Next slide. Click on the video so you can just kind of see an animation of how an actuator works. So a motor turning two gears that moves that rod up and down. So the number of actuators per inch of mirror can vary based on how advanced the telescope is, but in the largest observatories, there could be up to 11,000 actuators under one mirror, which is very expensive. Next slide. So the optical surface of the mirror that's being deformed is designed to be somewhat flexible to ensure that the actuators will actually be able to adjust the elevation of specific points on the mirror. because if it's too stiff, it can't move it. But if it's, you also don't want it to be too loose, because then one actuator could move the whole thing up, like it's like a piece of fabric or something. So the deformable mirror through adaptive optics can actually change its shape up to thousands of times per second, depending on the level of atmospheric distortion. So next slide. So when a telescope has been slewed to a new target and the light from it encounters an adaptive optics system, it first hits the deformable mirror, but the light's first passed through, it is not yet deformed. It's in its normal parabolic shape. So then it will encounter a beam splitter that's going to direct part of the incoming light towards the scientific instrument that you're going to be collecting the data from, and some of the light is redirected to a wavefront sensor. So the wavefront sensor has a camera that takes a picture of the incoming light and maps its distorted wavefront or shape. The wavefront sensor instructs the adaptive mirror to deform to the opposite shape of the inbound wavefront. In the light's second pass through the mirror, which will take place about a millisecond later, it'll hit the primary mirror, whose inverse shape negates the distortion, allowing for a sharp image. The light will once again meet the beam splitter, where some of the light travels to the main scientific instrument that begins sub-exposure, and part of the light will be redirected back to the wavefront sensor, which once again deforms the primary mirror to cancel out the atmospheric turbulence from the past millisecond, because it changes very fast. However, many of the star fields that a large research telescope will be focused on will be very small and not have a very bright star in them. Due to the extremely short 1 millisecond exposure time of the wavefront sensor, it doesn't have enough information to accurately deform the mirror just by examining extremely faint stars. So the adaptive optics system generates an artificial reference star by pointing a laser at the field the telescope is pointed at. Since Earth's atmosphere has a miles-thick layer of sodium atoms, the laser is specially tuned to excite these atoms, which in return re-emit the light from the laser as an artificial star. The artificial star does not appear in images taken with adaptive optics systems because the wavefront sensor has a separate camera, and its camera is focused low in the atmosphere. It doesn't matter that the wavefront sensor's camera is focused in a different spot, because the atmospheric distortion all happens below both areas the respective cameras are focused on. So similar to atmospheric distortion in relation to astronomy, ocular aberrations of the eye cause distortion while imaging the retina. So adaptive optics has also been applied to this field. Next slide. So ocular aberrations are distortions caused by a part of the eye, usually the crystalline lens, having a slightly curved imperfect curvature. That can be anything from like eye infections or just birth defects. It was there all along. So if you look at this graphic I have here, the red outlines are if your lens is perfectly shaped. So all the light goes in and reflects at one point in the back of your retina, but if your eye has ocular aberrations, then you're going to have, you could say, a distorted wavefront, but a curved surface that the light is passing through, and that's going to send the light in all sorts of directions. So these aberrations that you could see in the blue outline distort the camera's capacity to image the retina. And imaging the retina is really important because it's essential for diagnosing patients with vision problems, as many eye-borne diseases originate in the retina. Next slide. The retina is a tissue that makes up most of the eye that contains the photoreceptor cells, including rods and cones. It is the area of the eye that actually perceives the incoming light and sends the information received to the brain. That is why this area is so essential to have the proper technology to image so the proper diagnosis and treatment can be received. Adaptive optics has even been used to image individual rods and cones that are super small, and they can have signs in them that can lead to scientists being able to diagnose the medical issue. Next. So I wanted, you can just see here what adaptive optics imaging system looks like for medicine. So if there's the eye, your target, and you have your deformable mirror, kind of like the secondary mirror, and there's your beam splitter, and part of that is going to the scientific camera, part of it is going to the wavefront sensor, and then here this is acting as the sort of artificial reference star that I was mentioning earlier. So there are many current research papers being published about the retina, about the retina, specifically relating to the spacing, density, and physical properties of photoreceptor cells. That data would never have been attainable without the unrelenting use of adaptive optics. Adaptive optics, it's had a lasting impact in both fields that I mentioned, ever since it was first developed in the 1970s, and much research has been done in both fields that simply would not have been possible. The largest telescopes and the best retinal imaging systems all use adaptive optics to conduct research, and those specific specimens of technology alone have led to so much overall advancement. Humans would know so much less about the nature of our universe and our vehicle to perceive it, the eye, if it were not for adaptive optics. Thank you. And also, please, if you want to, I was originally going to do a talk on Robert Burnham, but then I didn't because I couldn't figure out how to shorten my 5,000-word essay about it, which you can read here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Tim Roski, my wife Julia. We've been coming to Stellafane since 2017, I believe, and we have made a telescope and all that. Back in about 2022, I was at a bird store, and they had this nice little book on the shelf about bats. And I said, well, we have a small camp in the Adirondacks, and I said, well, I need to learn a little bit more about those bats. They give me the heebie-jeebies, and maybe they shouldn't. So I got the book, and I got to the end of the book, and it said, you can detect bats with a bat detector. And I'm a huge gadget lover, and my wife loves bats and nature. So we decided that for our 32nd wedding anniversary, that our gift to each other would be a bat detector. Julia calls it the Bativersary, and I joke that I'm finally allowed to call her the old bat. So we can go to the next one. So you're at Stellafane, and the clouds roll in, or your telescope is all messed up. As Carl Malden used to say, what will you do? What will you do? So one thing that we started doing is we brought our bat detector here, and waiting for the clouds or waiting for it to get dark enough, we turned it on. Next slide. You observe the bats. And next slide. So you can watch bats. You'll see them against the sky. They're easy to spot. We have found a particular bat house at a friend's camp in Pennsylvania, and we go there and watch them emerge at night. Recently, we volunteered to help count bats coming out of a barn near our home in Albany, New York, and it's a blast. One thing that you can do is you could increase your vision by using night vision goggles, or these are just infrared. It's an infrared sensitive camera with an infrared illuminator, and it really does make a huge difference in what you can see. But the main topic of this talk is to use an acoustic detector to listen to the ultrasonic echolocation calls. So we can go to the next one. Before we get totally into that, I just want to say that we have found out that bats are quite beneficial. They're great for the environment. They eat a lot of bugs, including bugs that destroy crops, reducing the need for pesticides. They're also pollinators. There are all kinds of bats, fruit bats. If you like tequila, the bats are the ones responsible for pollinating the agave plants. And they spread seeds far and wide. Many bats travel miles and miles between their roosts and their feeding grounds. Next slide. So bats are not blind. They can see, but it is night, and they have similar issues that most of us have. They can't really gather enough light, especially at the speeds they're flying around. Bats are not aggressive. I am told, though I don't totally believe it yet, that they will not get tangled in your hair. But having been out several times with this bat detector in a bat-dense environment, I have not had any encounters that I would worry about. And they say, people think that they carry a lot more diseases. Yes, they can carry rabies. Their feces are not something that you want to mess around with. I read about 2 guys that decided to fertilize their marijuana plants with bat guano, and that did not work out well for them. I think one of them died. But it's similar to any other animal feces. Next slide. So, monitoring bat calls. Bats do their calling outside of the range of human hearing. Human hearing goes from about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and bats really start above that. There are some that are a little bit in the range of human hearing, but most are out of our range. So what we've done is, we as humans, not me, have created devices, and there's a whole range of bat detectors. There's one, I'm not going to get into the details of all the different ones, but we're using a microphone that can pick up the whole range of ultrasound. Next slide. So just a quick, the bat is on the top line. The bat calls go from 10,000 hertz to 120,000 hertz, and the humans are hearing in the blue line there ends at about 20,000 hertz, and that's only for the really young people. The young people can see through our telescopes better than us, gray-haired guys, but they also can hear higher frequencies. You lose your ability to hear really high frequencies as you age. Next one. So this is our setup. Julia's holding it there. And it consists of a small USB microphone on the upper left, and it's connected to an iPad. And we have this app called, I believe now it's called Ultrasonic Analyzer. And so you can hear the calls, you can listen to them live, and you can also view the spectrogram, which shows the frequency and the timing. The next slide, we're going to play for you a short video of the app in action with bats in the vicinity. So there's, I believe you have to, if you hover over that, there you go. It's longer than I thought. So this was recorded here at Stellafane Convention a couple years ago. We were down by the campsites along the road by the swap tables, and we could see them. They would come down, they were above the road, about 20 feet in the air, and we could hear them getting closer, and then we could hear them getting farther away. And then there was, you may have noticed, there were these little drops, and those are called feeding buzzes. That's when the bat catches the bug, and it makes a buzz. So just for reference, you could see that we had the frequency and the length and the amplitude all along there, so you can analyze that and you can actually figure out what species you're listening to. I think it goes into it more a little later, but just for reference, the next slide is a different species of bat recorded elsewhere. You can see that it's much higher up. That's the feeding buzz. Another little feeding buzz. For the audio and sampling people, if you want to record a bat that's calling at 40 kilohertz, you need to be sampling at least 80 kilohertz. So this microphone can do up to 384 kilohertz. Next slide. We think that's a little brown bat. We were hoping it was a northern long-eared that's endangered, but it's just more likely talking to and I forgot to warn you that we are not experts. We are just enthusiasts. We are amateur bat detectors. So these are the 9 species of bat that you can find in Vermont and New York, and a sample of their call. And this is what we're using to try to figure out what species there are. There are computer programs that are extremely expensive for amateur bat detective people. So we don't have that. Next slide. So that call, the first call from Stellafane, we believe belongs to the big brown bat. And that is a big brown bat that was hanging from a boathouse door that we saw a few years ago. And it was very cute and was not disturbed by us going up there and taking its picture. Next slide. So big brown bats are found all over North America, in the woods. They contribute, this is all from the Bat Conservation International. They contribute to a healthy environment and are vital players in pest control. And then a couple more talking points on the next slide. They live in trees and buildings. You can build a bat house. We have built 2 bat houses, and none of them have any bats in them. So, next slide. If you would like to get more information, these are some good books to start with. The Bat Basics is the one that I found in the bird store. The Secret Lives of Bats is by Merlin Tuttle. He's the founder of Bat Conservation International. That is a fascinating book of his studies, lifelong study of bats all around the world and all the adventures that go along with that. And if you wanted to learn more about doing scientific surveys and identifying bats by their calls, this book on the right is good. We have all these books here. So if you see us, we can give you a look at those. And that's it. There's our email addresses are there, and credits to the people that made the little bat template for us. Question?
In terms of the bat noises that you're hearing, how much of that is simply locating objects in front of them, or is some of it also a means of communication with other bats?
There are social calls and there are location calls. We think these are location. They're out going up and down the road looking for the next bug. So that's, like I said, we're not experts, but that's our. The social calls can be more complicated looking in their waveforms, and they're hard to interpret, so I wouldn't know what they're saying.
All right. Tim, Julia, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Tom Caudell, like I said, from Edgewood, New Mexico. We live in the mountains to the east of Albuquerque, where we're currently building our observatory. And that's the subject of this talk, is to go through that. It's going to be rather quick, sort of from zero to observatory in 10 minutes here. But the first thing I want to do, next slide, is to explain why this is a tribute to Palomar. I'm one of these people that were mentioned before that was strongly influenced by this telescope, the Mount Palomar telescope. When I was a young boy, there I am, kind of cool dressed, as you can tell. I had an opportunity to visit Southern California, and I talked my sisters into taking me to Palomar. And I walked in there, went up to the gallery that was inside there with glass against, nose against the glass, and I was just smitten. This instrument was so interesting and beautiful and stunning that it really influenced me to go into science. I was already interested in science, but as a result of this, I went into science. I built telescopes, I studied physics, got my PhD in physics, and I can trace it kind of back to that. And next slide, please. And so, actually, just keep it, go back, please. And so, because of that, when we retired and we were planning on building an observatory, it occurred to me that in honor of that effect that this telescope had on my life, we were going to build our telescope as a replicant or similar to the actual Palomar telescope. Now, this turns out to be an incredibly long project. That's 11 years ago. And the amount of energy and design, I mean, you could build a 16-inch telescope, in a very short period of time, but this took so much effort to do that we're still not quite done. But the first drawings you can see over there of what it's going to look like, it's different in a number of ways. It's a Newtonian, it's a different F ratio and that sort of thing. But we tried to stay as close as possible to the Palomar telescope and still be able to do it with our shop and materials that we had today. Next slide, please. So this all started right about the time of retirement. I bought a mirror. I have made mirrors before, but nothing in a 16-inch was just beyond the capacity of what I could do at this time. So we purchased a mirror, and there started the design process. We started drawings, sketches, engineering drawings of all sorts, and assigning. It's just a sort of an amalgam of just hundreds of drawings that actually represented the details of how this thing is built and where certain bolt holes are and all that sort of thing. If you go to the next slide. But the first thing we had to do was to actually build it out of materials we had. And so this telescope is mostly wood, aluminum, and a little bit of steel. This is Baltic birch wood. So to make the parts for the telescope, truss tubes, the horseshoe, the rings, the goers, all the arcs of it, a friend of mine had a shop bot in Tucson, Arizona that we could use, so I designed these parts and we went down there and cut them all out. And this saved a lot of time, and it's pretty accurate too. It's like 1/100 of an inch precision. So next slide, please. And so we basically made a kit out of these. Just some assembly required, and boy, does it require some assembly. So the gores are in the upper right-hand corner. You see the trusses. You see all the arcs and arc segments that went into the dome, and the various parts of the whole structure there. Next slide, please. So the first thing we had to do was actually make the foundation for it. This was manually dug holes. I don't have to spend a lot of time on this. You can recognize what you have to do. Build a slab, two-pore system. And the bottom right-hand side represents the ready for putting on the stem wall. Next slide. Stem wall needed the ring. So that ring that I'm standing in there was assembled by a double laminate of plywood, offset and connected, laid on the top there, and the lower right-hand corner shows the actual bearing wall with the rollers. We didn't have trucks, we didn't have train cars, couldn't do that sort of thing, but these little rollers are from sets in theater, from moving sets around. It's very strong and very shallow. So anyway, we got 10 of those around there to support the dome. Next slide. So then we had to build the dome, and we happened to have a barn that would hold the dome. And so this was a nice large project shop. We built this, you can see the various steps here. We built the frame for it. Again, all double laminated. The base plate of the dome is an icosagon, a 20-sided polygon. So we have a series of flat surfaces to connect the gores to. The gores are being assembled in the upper right. The lower left represents the dome after it's been assembled, and all the fiberglass seams have been fiberglassed together, and the one on the lower right is the dome finished. It's been painted with elastomeric paint ultimately. Now the problem was that was in the barn. You've heard the story about the person that built a sailboat in their basement, right? So how do we get it out of the barn? Turns out this thing's wider than the barn door. So anyway, next slide, please. So the best thing you do is to get a whole lot of people to come and help you. We had a party with like 30 or 40 people came, and we were able to lift it out, and it turned out it had to be tilted at 35 degrees to get out of the door, the barn door you see there behind where that person is looking really stupefied by the whole thing. I was like, what did we just do? So anyway, and we had a rack, we put it up on the rack, drove it up by the house where the site is, and they helped unload it and set it on the stem wall. So this is what people can do when they work together. Next slide. So the next project was to build the shutters for it. And roll off, the roll back over top, over the back sort of shutters are so much simpler than the actual opening and closing type of shutters. And this was one of the bigger engineering problems of the entire thing. The actuators, first of all, building a curved structure like that was strong, something that was lightweight, could be actuated. The rails you see are actually the rails of industrial closet door rollers that can go across. And they really smooth, very battery ball bearings, and then getting actuators that could move them back and forth, putting you see the little boots at the top on the lower right-hand corner up at the top, covering the actuators, so because of the weatherproofing, and also it had to be maintainable. One of my nightmares was you're working in the middle of the night, your dome's open, you see a flash of lightning, you're starting ready to. You need to shut down, you push a button and the thing doesn't close, right? So I had to have a way of releasing the nuts that were locked in the actuators and closing it manually. So that was a nightmare situation. But anyway, it's also in the barn. Next slide, please. So then we had to get that out of the barn, but on the upper left you can see that it was much easier to carry. We lifted it and carried it out of the barn, brought it up, clicked it into the dome, and it's been there for probably this way for better part of a year. And the seals and everything seems to be perfect. The storm clouds are there for a reason, to show you that it really has stood some terribly strong rains and winds, that sort of thing. And in the lower right represents the control panel for opening and closing the shutters. The problem with getting power to do that was taken care of by having it being battery powered and having a small solar panel on the outside back there that could rotate with the dome, so they don't have to have any wires leaving from the dome down. They don't have to have any way of bringing power onto the dome. Next slide. Then the next thing was to actually build the mount. Now this upper left-hand crane represents the parts of the mount, and this belies the complexity of that. That's hundreds of hours of machining and carpentry work, getting that all ready. You can kind of see, I wish I had a pointer, but there you can see the south pier, you can see the horseshoes, the yoke tubes, the yoke beam. On the upper right is the declination drive gear, which I had to make. That was a challenge of a lifetime, 270 teeth. It was very intimidating, but it works well. In the lower left is the north and south piers in the dome, mounted to the floors with their isolation. And then the lower right shows the actual horseshoe, the yoke system and horseshoe assembled. All the parts had to be brought in from the shop into the dome from underneath through those small doors and reassembled there. But that thing weighs about 200 pounds. So next slide, please. So we had to rig up a hoist system. I know that the actual Palomar itself has a crane inside of it, and I understand why now. We erected a temporary crane with a beam. It's really a hoist system. And we hoisted it up, and it was nerve-wracking because it had to be brought up and rotated and set back down onto the mount. And that was quite intense. You can see how the steps of it here. And it sets on, instead of using oil bearings, this is another change from Palomar. We used these rollers. The rollers work beautifully. That's a stainless steel band around the wood horseshoe there, but the problem they have, you probably would think of, is they flat spot. If you leave them stored that way for these kind of beautifully smooth rollers, they will flat spot. So I developed a release system that actually takes the load off of them when it's not in use. And then whenever we're ready to use it, drop it down and it can work, and it works perfectly. Next slide. Then the telescope. Oh yes, the telescope. We've got to have a telescope in this, right? So these are the various double laminated parts. This is all made with Baltic birch and high quality plywood. You can see the various stages of gluing and screwing it together. The mirror cell and some of the rings that I'm going to show you later were found objects from the Los Alamos scrapyard back in the 1990s. Los Alamos National Lab scrapyard. And the one on the lower right is the cage for the telescope. Next slide. Telescope assembled on there. The final telescope stacked up there with the cage and the mirror cell in it. Close-up of the actual optical bench sort of thing where I can screw in all kinds of different components for the telescope there. And you can see a glimpse of the secondary. Now, on the lower right, those discs represent an issue. What color is the color of our telescope? Really, what color? I mean, if you look it up, battleship gray, what is it, I mean, and can you take that formula down to Home Depot and get some paint from that, right? So Scott Cordell was he used to work at Caltech. He worked at Palomar. He's currently a professor at Mount Palomar Community College. And he was able to get me some photographs of the telescope with the shutters open, not incandescent light, but actually natural light. And using those natural light things, we did a human subject test had about 10 or 15 people, friends come over, matching the colors to these paint chips we have here, and pick the color that worked for us. And it turns out the color's name was Solstice. That was cool. So could have been anything, but it was Solstice. Okay, next slide. So here's a close-up of the 18-point suspension system mirror cell, the back of the mirror, water jet cut plate that mounts, that holds all the, that again parrots what Palomar has, and cooling fans, the collimation controls. This is the rotation table on the lower left-hand side for rotating the cage. That's another thing that we have to do, right? Since we have to be able to move it into comfortable positions, we had to be able to rotate it around. And those rings have Teflon bearings with Dobsonian type formica and that sort of thing. And then also a close-up of the spider, which uses a single pair of scissor spider vanes instead of a double like Palomar. So there's some changes here. Next slide. Then we had to get the actual telescope into the mount. And that used these are the steps of using that crane to actually lift it up, bolt it in. And you can see in the lower left, it's tied because it's not balanced. It doesn't have the mirror cell or the head on it, cage on it at that point. We added the cage on the top. You can see it in the lower right-hand side. Next slide, please. And so it was time to actually put the mirror cell in, but I didn't want to put the mirror into this until we were really finished with this so that nothing could damage the mirror. And so I was able to find a surrogate mirror made of a slab of aluminum. It weighs about 2 pounds less than the actual mirror, but I was able to put it into the mirror cell, put the mirror cell onto and put the mirror cell onto the bottom of the telescope to test balance. Now you're talking about something that weighs 30 pounds for the mirror, and the cell itself weighs like 20 pounds, right? So that's like 50 pounds. How am I going to lift that up and bolt it into place? So I had to build another device, and the upper right-hand shows an elevator system that's made of scissor jacks, and I added some motors to them so that I can actually raise it up, unbolt the mirror cell, lower it down, roll it out, work on it, roll it back in, and lift it back up and bolt it back into place. And that has saved me a lot of work because you have to be removing the mirror for cleaning and recoating at some point. And the final thing here is that when I finally got everything on there, it was way out of balance. It turned out that some of my mathematical model of the balance of the telescope wasn't quite right. It was too light at the top and too heavy at the top and too light at the bottom by like 15 pounds. And I finally able to trace what that was. But then I had to put some weights on the bottom that I hadn't planned on. I had planned on having the capacity to put some counterweights on the bottom, but I didn't want to use this much. So a friend suggested that I use lead, but I use bird shot, like gunshot sort of things, and put it in some kind of container and seal it with clear epoxy so it would really be seated. But what kind of a container to put that in? It had to be something that looked nice, looked reasonable, and I woke up one night and I thought, Tupperware pie slice savers. It's a weird thing to wake up at night saying, But I thought about that, and it worked. I was able to find them on eBay, and they're like antiques. And that's what those three things on the bottom there are, what I affectionately now call Tupper weights. They work, and they work really great. It's a great way to build counterweights. And then the lower right-hand side, the last thing I'm currently working on that will be the last thing we do before we put the actual optics in the telescope is to build the dust cover. Now, Palomar, as you know, has this rather complex dust cover that is used as an iris and that sort of thing, but it's way beyond the complexity of what I wanted to do. So I'm building one with 4 petals, like a flower. You can see that in the center thing there. Can you click on that lower right-hand side and see if that plays or not? There you go. And so these are going to be interleaved, go down one at a time, and interleave, lock over the actual telescope mirror and seal it up really well. So if you go to the last slide, or next last slide. So this is what it looks like now. It's the seals. You can see the seals on the shutters. You can see part of the mechanism for the declination drive. You can see the rollers. See a little bit of that lift system, that relief system I've talked about. And to me, it's an honor that this looks like this, because of what I've mentioned to you before, that this, seeing this view from the glass atrium in the dome was very, very moving on me. And when I go out and work on this, I go, my goodness, this is pretty cool. So next slide. So we're almost ready for, this is the dome with it open. We're just about ready to start using it. And like I said, we're nearly open for business. So thank you very much.
Thank you much. So the genesis of this talk was actually 3 years ago. I was observing in the binocular Olympics 3 years ago on the Hill, and this guy walks up to me and just started talking to me. We had a great conversation, but it was William Murphy, and he said, Dean, have you ever thought about giving a talk about the inventions of Harkness? And so that's where this came from. Harkness and Porter were just giants in their fields, and they were amazing engineers, and they were amazing inventors. And so I want to talk about that. I know a little bit about engineering. I have a PhD from the engineering school up the road in Hanover, and I was inventor of 25 patents, and I'm managing partner of a patent law firm. So I know a little bit about patents. So if we go to next slide. So I read the Harkness biography, and I would highly commend both of these to you to read. A representative of the machine age at its best. You go through and read this, and it's like you're just awed and inspired by this guy. Russell Porter, Arctic explorer, artist, telescope maker, by Burt Willard. I chatted briefly with Burt at the Harkness lectures on Thursday. Again, these are giants in multiple fields, and they did some inventing. It was amazing. Next slide. So Harkness was a business executive. As you read his biography, he had to go through a number of battles on patents, and it was kind of interesting. You could do a whole lecture series on what he did and the fights that he had over patents to enable him to be able to then go off and make the thing that he was most inspired by early on was the flat turret lathe. Now, I don't know what a flat turret lathe is. I'm sure people in here do. I'm a software and electronics guy, but it was impressive. He was Vermont governor. He was an aviator. He was the backer of Stellafane. He was an inventor. Porter was at Norwich and the University of Vermont and MIT. He was an Arctic explorer, including getting stuck in the Arctic for a too long period of time. He was an artist. He was the founder of Stellafane, and he was an inventor. Next. Harkness was the inventor of over 94 patents. Now, if you read his biographies, they'll say over 100 patents. I went off and looked in the LexisNexis. We have a full subscription to the LexisNexis database, and he had 94 patents in the US. I suspect that it goes to over 100 when you go to overseas patents. His first patent was in 1885 when he was 24. His last patent was in 1928 when he was 67. there are amazing on the number of patents on screws and threads, and just amazing engineers. There was one patent on a telescope, and I'm going to talk about that briefly. There was one patent that was shared with Porter. Porter was the inventor of over 6 patents, first in 1922 and the last in 1928. He was spending too much time exploring the Arctic to bother filing for any patents. He had 2 patents on telescopes. Next slide, please. This is the one patent that was shared by Hartness and Porter. It was filed in 1925. It was an optical comparator, and it allowed them to take a screw and image that screw, really blow that up, and project it so then you could see whether or not the screw was indeed the shape that it needed to be. Next slide, please. This is the Porter telescope, the turret telescope. And if you look at it, I was there on Thursday, and if you notice, there's a chair, and so I was able to poke my head into this room. You can't get into this room anymore, but that's the turret telescope that's over there at the Hartness Museum, and it's huge. It's amazing. Next slide, please. And I flipped the image of from the patent, so that it actually, you'll notice this really looks a lot like this, because it is the Hartness turret telescope from 1911. Next. And what did he protect? He protected an astronomical, a construction for astronomical observations. That's a fancy way of saying a telescope, a movable turret, a turret constituting a compartment for the observer. In other words, you're underneath the turret, so you don't have to go outside. And we have spent too much time outside, and it's really nice to do observing from inside. Closed to the external atmosphere, a telescope tube external to the turret. So the tube is outside, and it's pivoted, and the eyepiece is extended into the turret. So, what could infringe that but the turret telescope? Next slide, please. I'm going to talk briefly about 2 Porter patents. Here's the second telescope one. It's a little bit more flamboyant. It's got more. It's more decorative in appearance, and it really focuses on getting something on top of a pier and not as much on a telescope. I'm going to go to the first one because that one's more focused on telescopes. Next slide, please. All right, this is the Garden Telescope, and I looked at this and I studied this patent, and it took me a little while to figure out which end was up and what was going on. Very clearly, this is the eyepiece. Okay, good. This 30 is the mirror, and it's parabolic. It looks pretty flat there, but trust me, it is parabolic. And if you go to the next slide, please. Go one more, please. So there's the mirror, there's the bowl, and there's the bell. Next slide. And there's the trunnion for being able to rotate in declination. Next slide. And there is the polar alignment on it. Okay, next slide. And what is it that's being claimed? What's being claimed is a reflecting telescope with a parabolic reflector, and it's movable and about the polar axis and the declination. Just go back a few slides, if you would, to the one other text one. There we go. This is in the opening of the patent, and he talks about a telescope for terrestrial and celestial observation that can be sold at a reasonable price. Porter was concerned about cost, so that, and we all benefit from this, being able to withstand relatively rough usage. How many people here have been in an outreach event and somebody is rough with your device? I think we have too many stories that we could tell, and it's painful, but it's good to do those outreach events. And it's mounted permanently, okay, so you don't have to drag it in and out, and it lends itself to ornamental treatment so that it's pleasing to the eye. So Porter was concerned about cost, appearance, and being able to make it available. Go ahead, move forward, please. Keep going. There it is. There is the garden telescope, and there's the image of it. Go ahead, next slide. So Harkness and Porter were each giants in multiple fields. They were serious about astronomy. They were serious inventors, as well as in other fields. And they're inspiring. Next slide, please. And here's the pink clubhouse that Porter drew and sketched as an artist in 1923. This is a photograph that I took last year at Stellafane, and there is the binocular Olympic showing the pink clubhouse. And I was inspired and encouraged and challenged as I saw what these guys had done, and I just thought that it'd be fun to kind of share that with you all. Thanks.
Hey guys. So unfortunately, 5 years ago I had to move. I moved from Milford, Connecticut, which was a Bortle 4, to Northborough, Mass, which is Bortle 8. And it's one of those bad scenarios that you have to deal with. The house goes up for sale. You got to do something with the old observatory. Has anyone had the experience of dismantling an observatory? We all build them. All right, we're gonna dismantle it, and then I'm gonna take it forward. So, how's that? You got it. All right, so this is what my observatory looked like 14 years ago. I rolled the walls right on out beautifully. 14 years later, the dome, looking pretty ratty. The walls are completely shot. The only thing salvageable was the top ring. So that's what I started with structure-wise. Unfortunately, the next page is the concrete. I don't know if you guys have any experience with busting up concrete, but it's not fun. So basically, you have to whack it with a 17-pound sledgehammer. You hit it about 3 or 4 times, and maybe a piece the size of your fist comes off of it. I tried cutting it like a tree with a skill saw and a special blade. It doesn't work. You cannot cut concrete like a tree. I thought I would be clever. I found this basketball pole on the side of the road. I figured I'd shove it down the middle of the 12-inch concrete pier to give it some more strength. Unfortunately, that came back to haunt me when I had to pull it out. The only way to get this thing off is with a demo saw. It's a 16-inch diamond bladed demo saw that you can rent from the hardware store. But it's an absolute nightmare to bust this up. This took me 2 weekends, but I got it off. Unfortunately, threw everything in the woods and covered it up. So yeah, that's the old observatory, and you know, good riddance. So the new guy at least gets a clean backyard. So next one. So now it's like, okay, we're going to make a new one. So I'm going to start with wood this time, thinking wood is going to be better than concrete. Certainly structurally removing it is going to be better, but is it really better? I'll tell you that in a minute. So I marked it out real carefully. I got my 10-inch tubes from Home Depot, but I needed a 14-inch tube, which I had to get from a plumbing supply, a contracting supply store. He gives me a 16-inch tube, and I'm trying to figure out how to put it in my Honda, which was kind of a disaster. I basically cut it in half. I could only get 8 foot in, and I literally had to leave the other 8 foot behind. Nothing I can do with it. So anyway, you got to rent that auger from Home Depot. Unfortunately, it kind of gets away from you. So my 12-foot markings turned into be like 12 and 13, and they were a little bit off, to say the least. Then I had to make the concrete pattern for the bolts that the pier is going to go on, and you can see I framed it in with 2x10s, a lot of wood, a lot of expensive wood. So that was my final base, ready for the next step. So next one. So you're cutting a lot of arcs for the top and bottom, and you can see here I've got my sky shed pier that I got from Canada, and Dan's top plate, which I had from my other observatory. I just brought it over, and you're literally building this cylinder from the ground up. Now, this is only 7 foot, so me and my son were able to get the top on And you can see here where I've added the extra supports. They're actually very handy because they actually become shelves. You can put your eyepiece on there, the case on there, your camera on there, a bunch of things. At the end of the night, you got to round everything up. But so structurally, they're good, and also, they're wonderful shelves. So put as many as you can on there if you're building this thing. I also made the step in the back the whole entire way, so I'm not going to fall off and kill myself in 3 o'clock in the morning. So that is my. Oh, the other good thing is you can see where I spliced in the top ring that I cut off from the other site. So now it's actually 5.5 feet. So now I don't hit my head every time when I walk into it. So that's a good situation there. We'll go to the next slide. And that's my finished dome. My wife thinks it's a bit of an eyesore. I planted flowers. The flowers are not going to grow 8 feet tall. I mean, you're going to get what you get, right? So it's a used 2004 C14. It's on an Orion mount, and I use the Cartes de Seal, I think it's pronounced, with EQ mod to run it. I've got an absurd amount of active fans keeping the air moving. Got a couple thermocouples, and you can see I've got air coming in and out, 2 coming out at the top, 2 coming in by the top of the mirror, and I got 3 as a vortex fan. So the key is for planetary imaging to have perfect thermal conditions, and if the tube is sitting there idle, it's not ideal. The other trick I found is you're spending all your time on the north side, so there's no reason to center the pier. So by having a 6-inch offset, you have a little bit more room to work, and it's like you're getting an 8-foot dome for the price of 7. So it's a good situation there. This one, it's all turned by hand. I've got a series of inline skate wheels and skateboard wheels to keep it moving. It does go pretty good. And I got all my fan boxes, and my laptop is outside because there's really no room inside this dome for that. There is one thing, if you hit the prototype, I'm still working out the bugs on this one. I think it's kind of crazy, but I will show you. I think Dom has seen this. Not too many other people have seen it. If it doesn't work, does it work? Prototype? Okay, it should be on the stick. It's all right. We'll skip it. It's kind of crazy anyway. It's not working? Okay. It should be in that. Just stick it in there and see if it finds it. If it doesn't find it, we'll just move on. So anyway, it's kind of a unique setup with all these fans. Yeah, so anyway, my theory was to connect all the fans into one system. So I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I'm also thinking there's an ideal amount of insulation, certainly not near the mirror, but opposite. So anyway, I'm still working out the bugs. It's kind of crazy. I don't know if you guys ever seen anything like that. Probably not. Probably good reason for it. But anyway, we'll close that down. So anyway, earlier this year, there was a planet parade, right? All the planets were all together. Did anybody see it? Yeah, it really wasn't much, was it? Right, let's face it. You're not going to look at a planet when it's near the sun, low on the horizon, and bad seeing. That's like the worst thing you could do, right? So what if I told you there was a day last year, okay, that all the planets were in good seeing, all in one night? You think I'm crazy, right? In Worcester. Go to the next page. All right. On September 15th through the 16th, there's actually 15 hours of good seeing. I've never seen this before. All of those programs that we always click on, 3, 4, 5, 8 times a day, right? We check them more than our stocks, right, Dom? They were all in agreement. I don't think I've ever seen that before. So I was like, I just wanted to really work on Saturn, but when I saw this, I'm like, okay, I got Saturn in the evening, I've got Mars and Jupiter in the morning. If I don't go to bed, I got Neptune and Uranus. Two mornings earlier, I had my all-time best Mercury. That's 6. I'm like, okay, where's Venus? Venus is already out. So I literally ran out of my house and went to Venus. Now, Venus in the daytime, you're not going to find it. You're not going to find anything in the daytime. But if you slew to the sun with a filter, and you focus on the sun with a filter, and you sync to the sun, your computer's locked on. You then slew to Venus, take your filter off, bang, there it is. It's right in the field of view, and it's perfect. So I'm going to share with you some Venus data with the 807 filter. There are better filters out there, but that's what I had at the time. What I did use is this corrector, the ADC. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Anytime it's less than 45 degrees, you're going to have the blue and the red kind of fringing, and it's going to affect the detail of your image. So anytime it's 45 or less, I like to use that ADC. So we've got Venus. Venus and Mercury, you probably don't want to have a high histogram. I like to go around 55 so you can still sharpen it without burning it. The next one I had was Saturn, and that one I did with a color camera. I didn't want to have all these RGB files to deal with, so in a marathon, you're just trying to work with what you have. Neptune and Uranus, a little bit different. You want to crank up the histogram to 99% because you're trying to get that detail. Jupiter and Mars, backed it off to 70%. And then Mercury. Mercury is always low. This is like 16 degrees. Literally, I had the ADC wide open, and it probably could have used a little bit more. Here I used a very deep filter, the IR 685, to really cut through the scene. So that is essentially the overall. Let me take you through the shots that I took that day. So you can see some craters on Mercury. There is some banding that's visible on Venus. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see Olympus Mons for Mars. And we'll do the next set. So here you got the Great Red Spot. I mean, when do you ever get the Great Red Spot and Olympus Mons on the same night? That's pretty remarkable. Some nice banding on Saturn. Keep going. And then we have some nice banding on Uranus. And it's hard to tell here, but there is some slight banding on Neptune. So it was really quite a good set. So that was what I would consider the real planet parade, not the one that you were told about earlier this year. So there was also a couple other good ones I'll just take you through. The next one, this was the lunar occultation. Anybody see that? Yeah, that was quite something, wasn't it? Pretty rare. And this one happened to be 60 frames. And I like this one because it's literally, the limb is cutting through the ice cap. So I just found that pretty remarkable. And that's no Barlow. That's just right out of the camera running the C14. Next one. So the other crazy thing about this telescope is if you take off the secondary mirror and replace it with the Hyperstar unit, you can actually turn this thing into a 1.9 F scope, which is pretty much a light bucket, 690 millimeters. And I wanted to get Pluto. Every year I try to get Pluto. And hopefully this animation works. Yeah, it doesn't sound good. So anyway, what I did for Pluto, I took 5 30-second shots. And you can see that little guy in the middle. Pluto's kind of funny because you really don't know where it is until you look at it photographically. So M75 was a globular nearby. So if you, again, sync on M75, you will then guarantee yourself that Pluto is right in the center. So this represents 84 minutes of movement. So if you go back to the other one, So, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to sit there and wait for another 5 shots. So during that time, I took the M31 and the bubble and went back and got my last 5 shots. Now keep in mind, those are taken at 24 and 22 degrees altitude. That's pretty low. It's about as low as I can go without it hitting my trees. But anyway, it's a very versatile scope, and you can see it's just, it's the camera is at the end of the scope. So next one. All right, so in summary, the C14 is very economical. I bought the scope used with the mount, so I spent $6,000 on that setup. I think it's perfect for a small observatory. You have multiple focal lengths in one. My recommendation is to avoid the wood, because then you have to buy the pier. I would just do the whole thing in concrete. The seeing doesn't improve. If you have a 14-inch scope, you think you're going to improve by spending 6 times more money? False. Save your money, put it somewhere else. But I would say if you do it with the concrete, don't peel the sonotube off. It's a perfect insulator. Just paint it black. Cover the floor with insulation and plywood and a rubber mat or something. Because I will say my Teleview 55 did bounce off the concrete, didn't do too well. The glass is still good, but it's slightly dented. And always offset your scope, your pier by 6 inches to gain a little extra space. And if you don't bolt it down, you can actually optimize where it goes. And it's so heavy, quite frankly, you don't have to bolt it down. It's not going anywhere, So anyway, the key is to practice. If you sit around and wait for that perfect night, you're not going to remember what you did the last time. So you got to get out there and keep practicing, keep trying, and maybe you'll come up with something new. And anyway, that's what we got. So hope that's it. Any questions? Yes. Oh, 685. That's I believe it's Astronomic IR 685. It's very good for cutting through. It obviously makes it very dark, but on a very bright image, it's wonderful. You can even use it on the moon. If you're doing lunar, it's very good on the moon.
And you also mentioned the dispersion.
Yeah, dispersion corrector. Yeah, so it's a very good one. They're not that very much money from ZWO. They're a little bit funny with the levers. You have to get them just right. You play around with it. But you can usually you put in a high mag eyepiece, and you can see which way the levers have to go. And if they go in the right, opposite directions, it's very helpful.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. As most of y'all probably do, I get on cloudy nights, and I like to mess around, build stuff, and found a guy who would always jump in on any discussion of pipe mounts. And I'm fascinated by pipe mounts because they're cheap and I can just change them up and do different things until I get it right. Well, this guy, David, and I'm assuming you pronounce it Plancon, died last year, and I found that out because I was looking for one of his posts. But he posted 7,700 posts on cloudy nights. He lived way out in rural Maine. He was off the grid, and primarily what he did was he talked about just observing nature in his yard. He would go out on his back deck and look at deer and birds and the sky, all from right there at his house. And it must have been dark because he really enjoyed what he did, and he would just post that in general discussions. Next slide, please. So what I liked about his stuff is how simple it is and how it's just roughly made to achieve the goal. And that's when he would jump into conversations. People would agonize over details on how they would optimize something. He'd say, hey, just do this. It'll work. Go outside and enjoy. So here's one of his mounts where he takes a little refractor and he starts adding things to it to make it work. One is he wanted a stable mount. So he would use heavy enough stuff and recycle tripod parts and crutches and other things. I've found that crutches the price has gone up in the secondhand stores. It's a little frustrating. But he'd use ordinary galvanized pipe parts, and then weights that would go over a 3/4 inch piece of pipe. He would also make setting circles and altitude finders as well, and these were extremely simple because he just needed to get in the ballpark with these short refractors. Next slide, please. So here he is on his back porch, and what he would always jump into these discussions about was people would say, well, I need to do this, I need to do that, and he says, no, just go do this. Just make you a counterbalanced pipe mount for your binoculars. He would sit in this rolling chair right outside of his back door, and he could move those binoculars to anywhere he needed to go and scoot his chair around too. And that was extremely simple and extremely cheap. And really, I started copying some of his designs and other things that I would make to try out. But that's the sort of simplicity that I admired in his posts. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a 2-telescope mount where he used a T and then, of course, had setting circles, but he also used jar lids. And I collect these, and it probably drives my wife nuts because I pull them off all the jars in the house. You could throw small parts in them, for one thing, and that makes them handy in the shop. But Dave would use them for a couple of different things, and I've tried both, and it works really well. One is when you need a larger handle on a knob. You could use a jar lid. You know where the center is because it has a dimple in it, and you can put that on a screw on a focuser on a telescope and make it where you can get a little bit more fine tuning. But the other thing that is really, really a smart move is where you see the 2 blue jar lids. That is between those pipe nipples and the flanges. And what he would do is cut a hole in the middle of the in the middle of the jar lid that was about the same diameter as the threaded part of the nipple, and he would turn that on to those threads. And then if the balance wasn't perfect and he needed to add a little friction, all he had to do was turn that jar lid clockwise, and it would push up against the pipe flange just enough to give it a little friction. It works great. I've used it on some binocular mounts, and it is fantastic. And you can find it in the dark. You just reach there, and it's usually pretty large. So this kind of stuff is great. I wish the internet existed when I was 13. I would have been messing around with all kinds of things. Next slide, please. This is his large mount that he called Frank. So this is his back porch, and he could just look at the sky and look at nature out there. But it's cobbled together out of, at the base, some lumber and then pipe parts going up from that so that he's got a stabilized column. And then at the top, there's a T, and that is counterbalanced opposite the telescope side. So a nipple comes out, it's all been lapped, so he used a grit, usually a valve lapping compound, and put it on those threads and work them back and forth until they're more or less smooth. And then it would be counterbalanced opposite the telescope. Then on the telescope end, there's a pipe flange on lap threads so that it can move the telescope up and down and around and also tilt it. And I'll show you in a minute why that was an advantage for what he would do. But that would hold a 120 millimeter refractor, and there's one of the crutches that he added as a handle on the bottom of that telescope, because if you're like me, you always grab the diagonal, and that's probably not good. Next slide, please. So here he is observing on that porch, and he posted these 2 pictures to show that the telescope came to him. He could sit in the chair and just look up or down, and the telescope eyepiece would always be where he needed it to be. So there was no contortion or standing on one leg or anything like that. And he said it was plenty steady and was able to observe from right there and just, again, move the chair a little bit on that porch, and it would work out for him. So that was a really, really neat setup. Next slide, if there is one. All right, well, I appreciate y'all. And I just wanted to talk about a guy who I admired. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bruce, and hi, everybody. And my talk tonight is going to be about the very first attempt to view a total solar eclipse from a ship. Now, whenever a total eclipse comes along nowadays, if it passes over a relatively large area of water, there usually are more than a few cruises set up so that they can intercept the shadow, but this is a concept that did not exist prior to 1972. In 1972, there was a total eclipse of the sun. You could see the Sky and Telescope here promoting the event. They called it the Alcan total eclipse because the path of totality first passed over the far northern reaches of Alaska and then worked its way across northern Canada, the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. Those are places which I'm sure great place to take the wife and kids for a weekend, but not necessarily if you are trying to see a total eclipse of the sun. However, next slide. Toward the end of the eclipse track, before it moved out over the Atlantic Ocean, the eclipse passed over Atlantic Canada, and so across the Gaspé Peninsula of Quebec and Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, many, many amateur astronomers and professional astronomers lined the path of totality to observe this eclipse. Yours truly was up here at Cap Chat, Quebec, where it was mostly cloudy, although unlike many of my cohorts, the sun did break through during totality, and so I did have a chance to see about 2 minutes of totality. The first 30 seconds were obscured by cloud cover. Now, these were the ways to get to see a total eclipse. You flew to eclipse, you drove, maybe you took a train, or you just walked, whatever, but going on an ocean liner? Next slide. This is the ocean liner in question. That is the pioneering ocean liner that made the first observations of a total eclipse. This is the TSS Olympia. The Olympia was owned by Greek Lines back in 1972. Now, the gentleman who came up with the idea, the concept of eclipse cruises, was Dr. Phil Sigler, professor of social sciences at Staten Island Community College. And a couple of years in advance of the solar eclipse, he contacted every single cruise line that he could get that could be available to him and explained what he wanted to do, and every single cruise line said no. They saw no reason to sail out in the middle of the chilly Atlantic waters during the summertime to see an event that basically was going to last only 1 or 2 minutes. Many of the cruise lines said, I don't understand it. We don't think that it's a saleable event. However, Phil had a brother-in-law, Ted Pettis, who was Greek. And so Ted Pettis went to the Greek lines, explained the situation, maybe actually talked in their native tongue, the Greek language. And the president of Greek Line said, okay, you got the ship, but first you got to handy up the money. He said, if you can come up with the money to charter the ship is yours. So Phil and Ted immediately got to work and started putting ads, next slide please, in various newspapers, and here's the ad that appeared in Sky and Telescope, indicating that they were going to make the attempt to see the 72 eclipse from a ship. And the key inviting idea of the ship, the concept of the ship was it had mobility. So if in fact it was going to be cloudy in any one spot, they could move the ship to a place where the skies presumably would be clear and that you'd be able to see a total eclipse of the sun. And unlike all of the other cruise lines who said, nah, this is not a saleable event or saleable item, unlike all those cruise lines that passed on this, within less than 2 months after the ads went in Sky and Telescope and various magazines, the ship sold out. Over 800 passengers on this 23,000 ton. And you know, today, cruise ships are so gigantic. 200,000 tons, 5,000 and 6,000 people. This, compared to the ships of today, was a relatively small ship. 23,000 tons, 825 passengers, but they sold out in time for the upcoming eclipse. Next slide. The guy, and they got a number of different famous people to come on board to lecture. Scott Carpenter, the astronaut, the Mercury astronaut, was on board. Joseph Chamberlain, the head of the planetarium in Chicago, he was there. Many noted lecturers, but the guy who was probably the most important was this guy right here, Edward M. Brooks. Ed Brooks was a professor of geophysics at Boston College, and actually, to me, I'm dedicating this talk to Ed. Ed's knowledge of meteorology was encyclopedic, and he had gotten the job as the onboard meteorologist on this very first eclipse cruise because of his reputation for seat-of-the-pants forecasting the eclipse weather at previous eclipses. Next slide. So here you see Ed here, along with Phil Sigler, the progenitor, the guy who came up with the idea for this eclipse cruise. Now, the eclipse cruise sailed out of New York on July the 8th. The eclipse was on July the 10th. So 2 days before the eclipse, pulling out of New York Harbor, out into the Atlantic Ocean, was the TSS Olympia. And on the first night of the cruise, Ed Brooks had to give a weather forecast. He told everybody on board the ship that he thought that they had only about a 50-50 chance of seeing it because there was a weather front between where the ship was and where the totality path where they were headed for was located, and he wasn't sure exactly whether or not they would be able to see the eclipse. The weather was not bad to the south or to the north, said Ed, it's bad in the middle. And so we have to figure out, hopefully, within the next 48 hours, where we're going to place the ship. So, what you're going to see now is a clip from a documentary that was done in the aftermath of this pioneering venture of a solar eclipse cruise. And this is the first evening when they were introducing all of the lecturers, and Ed was the last person to be introduced. Phil Sigler was the one who introduced him, and here's how the introductions went.
Mr. Brooks give his weather forecast, and we certainly hope that he gets us there. If he doesn't, I have a raft for him waiting downstairs, which we'll be able to take that now, I think. But well, I'll tell you what, though, Ed, that if you do get us there, I've got something else for you, Ed. Why don't you help me unfold it? What is this anyway? Well, inside. That's it. Dr. Brooks will give it to the steward, and the steward is going to hoist this flag, and it's going to be our symbol if we are successful. As long as you don't hoist me up there with it. Thank you very, very much. Good night.
So that was the first night. And just to show you, next slide now, exactly what they were attempting to do. They sailed from New York on Saturday afternoon, July the 8th. They were headed on a track that would take them straight east from New York for about 900 miles, and they were going to intercept the path of totality out in the Atlantic Ocean. Here's the path of totality, and there was the initial position of where the ship was going to go, but take note of the fact that they took a turn very quickly to the south and east, and they did that because they were going to run through a cold front, and after they passed through the cold front, a squall line of thunderstorms developed. And that squall line of storms, then after it developed, pushed rapidly to the east, overtook the ship. And the problem here was, after the squall was moving through with thunderstorms, the question was, well, will the skies clear behind the squalls in time for the eclipse on Monday afternoon, July the 10th. Let's move to the next clip. And you will see that everybody was all happy and gay, singing and dancing. This guy obviously looks worried. But it was also midnight buffet time. And there were a lot of kids on board, so why not? Let's ante up with the food. And they were showing movies with astronomy and eclipse themes like Space Odyssey and a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Here's another worried amateur. And then at 11:30, Dr. Brooks gave his weather briefing.
The three things I wanted to show you in this picture. The path of the total eclipse. This part I'm most confident about because the astronomers usually get this right within a matter of a mile or so. The second thing, which I'm fairly confident about, is the course of the ship. Straight east along 41 degrees latitude. In addition to that line, we have the front, which has been with us for the last 4 days, which runs in a northeast-southwest direction. And one last thing I haven't put on yet, and that is the position of the iceberg. They're over here. As we checked the winds, it was east-northeast 30 knots. You notice there's a little bit of a pitching to the ship. And then later at about 11 o'clock, we found that the wind was changed to the south. And the temperature is higher now in the 70s. The air is muggy. So this indicates that we now have a squall line running parallel to the front out ahead of it. And this squall line is moving faster than the front. So we have succeeded in catching up with the cold front, but we have apparently just about, I'm not sure whether they're caught up with it or not. I don't think much. Does anybody know what's going on outside? We can't figure out.
Next slide. So here's the front in question. And so they passed through the cold front, then a squall line developed right along the front, rapidly moved to the east, and has now overtaken the ship. Next slide. There's the squall line. So here's the position as of the time of the eclipse. The cold front was here with its share of cloud cover. The squall line was now out ahead of the ship. Here's the position for the eclipse. And so the question that Dr. Brooks was wondering about was, we were 200 miles away from the eclipse position, and he said, I don't think that the squall line, the thunderstorm, and its associated clouds are 200 miles wide. I think they're only about 100 miles wide, but at this point, I'm not sure. So I'm only going to give a 50-50 chance for clear weather for the eclipse, which now is coming their way the following afternoon at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Next slide, next clip.
Tomorrow we'll have 50% cloudiness, and we figure that we have until 4 o'clock to maneuver. So everything is going according to schedule, and we know the time is going to run ahead on a very regular manner. That's predictable. So all we have to do is be ready at the right time in the right place. Any questions?
The question is, would the skies clear for the eclipse? Next morning.
D.C., where the Weather Service has its national headquarters, and asked them about a satellite picture which would cover the clouds surrounding where we are now located. And they told me that we are in a hole, means that we have a clear circular area, and we're inside this hole, and there are clouds all around us. The clouds are to the east of us, and further southeast were the same ones that gave us the thunderstorm last night. The other area of clouds is connected with a cold front, which is approaching from the northwest at about 10 to 15 knots. And since that is moving toward us, we are planning to move along, and our destination now will be 40½ degrees north and 55 degrees west.
Next slide. This is the satellite picture from the ATS satellite, not in existence anymore. This is over 50 years ago, the Applications Technology Satellite. And to show you exactly where Dr. Brooks positioned the ship, let's have a close-up. Next slide. So here is the squall line that passed over the ship the previous night, and here is the cloud cover associated with the cold front to the north and west, and the ship was right in this donut hole of clear weather, clear skies, right there. And since everything was moving along toward the east-southeast, the projection for the ship's path was to move along with the hole in the clouds. And so that's what they did. And so now what you're going to see is the final, what everybody came to see that Monday afternoon, the total eclipse of the sun, the event starting at the point of first contact and then leading up to totality. And the excitement is built with very good narration and also with music. If you're into classical music, The Seasons by Alexander Glazunov. And as you can see, everybody was looking at this point, and I do mean everybody, man and beast.
Time just stopped. The eclipse was frozen above us, like a phenomenal photograph pasted on the dome of the sky. How much alien stimulation can a mind process in just a little over a minute? You might have been waiting so intently for the first diamond ring that you missed seeing the shadow bands a number of passengers reported. Or you might have glanced away from the brilliant diamond ring and missed the elusive Bailey's beads as the last of the sun's limbs slipped behind the mountains of the moon. The corona might have so hypnotized you that your eyes did not stray far enough to show you the winter star Procyon or the planet Mercury. You might have missed a great deal if you were among those searching within the orbit of Mercury for undiscovered objects. But how worth it if you found a comet or a new planet? No one saw it all. We had to compare notes with other observers to piece together a chronicle of that sensational minute. A slow photographic exposure could show all but the subtle streamers of the outer corona. A fast one could capture prominences, explosions of gas many times the size of the Earth that were arrayed along an upper limb of the sun. So much of it could not be photographed. And yet everyone knew that with each successive eclipse, photographic technology had advanced. And this time, more could be recorded than last time. But the cold wind, the gentle rocking of the ship, the sounds, the shouts, the companionship were forever outside the province of photography. Time was not standing still. Now it seemed as if a minute had been not stretched, but lost out of time. After the spectacular instant of the third contact diamond ring, it was over.
Final slide. That says it all. Thank you very, very much. And of course, after that first eclipse cruise, all of a sudden cruise line said, hey, that's something that we could sell. And the rest is history. And that's why today eclipse cruises are a major way of getting people to see total eclipses of the sun. It was all due to this pioneering very first attempt back over 50 years ago in 1972. Thank you very, very much.